Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here, Tiger Tank 12, however you want to call me, I don't really care. And today we are going to start off a chain of certain videos that I've been planning for quite a while now. I completely forgot to do this a very long time ago, since I did have the Stug IV, the T28 HTC, the T55a, and the Object 260 in my garage now for quite a while. But back in the days, I thought I would make a review of all the vehicles, all separately, of course, in separate videos. But I make a review of all these tanks as soon as I've gotten every tank, and it took me a bit longer to get the Object 260. So yeah, I completely forgotten to make a review of all the other tanks. But this is going to stop. We're going to start today with the Stug IV, the first premium tank that you can unlock in the campaign. And what you'll have to do is you have to finish, now since this is new, you'll have to finish all 5 different vehicle type 15 missions. So all the 15 missions for every vehicle type you have to finish to get to the Stug IV. You'll get like a different part of the vehicle, like the engine when you finish the light tank mission 15. You get the suspension when you finish the medium tank mission 15. You get the hull when you finish the heavy tank mission 15. So on and so forth. And why would you even bother? Well, first and foremost, these missions you can do by just playing the game. And especially for this kind of tank, for this tier 5 reward vehicle, it is rather easy. Most of these missions, well, they can be quite challenging if you don't have the right tanks for it, but at the same time, you don't really have to go for them. You can just play the game, you can add a new mission into it, and by chance, a lot of times you'll finish the mission, or else you can aim for it, and then it's going to get really easy or very difficult from time to time. That's just how missions go, but I think it's really cool. At the end, you're going to be standing here with a tier 5 premium tank, but that is very important. None of these premium reward vehicles do have premium credit making skills, so this tank only trains the crew, but still, it's very cool. It's a novelty of a tank, and just by looking at it, you can see it's kind of a novelty. So, first and foremost, we're going to take a look at the tank, then we're going to take a look at the statistics, then we're going to take a look at the games, how it does do in practice, and then I will give you my verdict. Now, first and foremost, before we get into the statistics, I just want to say I think it's totally worth it to get any of the free tanks just by playing the game, so that is pretty much right off out of the way if it is worth it. This tank, in regards of its performance, that is something different, and I just want to keep you guys informed that you should view it as kind of separate, because it's not as simple as it looks like. So let's take a look at the tank. What you can see is that there is another Stug in the game. It's the Stug 3G and the Stug 4B, I think. And what you can see is that this tank looks a little bit different because it has the side panels on the tank. We can take a look right at the vehicle details. So, in February 1943, at the suggestion of the Ministry of Armament, the Krupp company began trials of a new vehicle with the superstructure of the updated Stug III and the new suspension of the Panzerkampfwagen 4 H and J. So the suspension is from the Panzerkampfwagen 4. The first vehicles were produced by December 1943. Having cancelled the production of the Panzer IV, the Krupp company focused their attention on the production of the new vehicles starting in January 1944. A total of 1,108 vehicles were manufactured, with 31 more converted from existing tanks. So what is very iconic about this tank is you can see the side panels right here, and these are steel plates that should protect the side of the tank from small arms fire and from anti-tank rifles, because as a tank destroyer you had limited protection against infantry, and that's exactly the problem that a lot of German tanks faced in the Soviet Union, that tank destroyers could get surrounded by infantry, by partisans, getting into an ambush or whatever, and they would throw anti-tank grenades. They used those anti-tank rifles against the vehicles, and by penetrating, they could penetrate the side armor, thus knocking out the tank. But with these side panels here at the side, they could add a little bit of protection to give them a bit of an added, protection from these shells. But obviously against tanks, it's not going to be as effective. It still does take a little bit out of the velocity, but still not going to be as effective as additional armor plating or more armor in that area of the tank. So we are going to be comparing this tank. First and foremost, the statistics of this vehicle will be compared immediately to the Stug 3G, the Su-85, and the Wolverine. Now, all of these tanks are fully upgraded, so it's going to be a fair comparison because the Stug IV cannot be in a stock variant since it's a premium tank. First thing we'll notice is that the average damage is the lowest on the Stug IV, and that has to do with the armament of this tank. It's a 75mm gun that is not the same as the Stug 3G. If you remember, the Stug 3G has the same gun as the E25 has, and that is a 75mm gun with 150mm of penetration, the best pen of all the 4 vehicles here. The Stug IV only has 110mm of pen and not the same gun, but the rate of fire is much better than on the Stug 3G. And the aim time is also a bit better than on the Stug 3G. But the Stug 3G has average, speaking, a much better gun than the Stug 4. The Su-85 is also more competitive with its gun. The Wolverine with its 76mm gun is also rather competitive, especially regarding the gun depression with 10 degrees of gun depression. And you can see that the rate of fire is the best on the Wolverine. The Stug 4 is basically, in this area, a kind of a downgraded Stug 3G. And that is something you'll notice throughout this kind of review, because the Stug 4 does have the same amount of armor, but it doesn't have the same amount of rear armor as the Stug 3G has. It is protected better than the other 2 vehicles, the Su-85 and the Wolverine, but still it's not protected good enough to face off tier 5 opponents, So basically, this tank is meant to be a sniping vehicle, since the accuracy of this tank with 0.33 dispersion at 100 meters is not too bad. The Stug 3G is a bit better, but still, generally speaking, accuracy and aim time allow this tank to be fairly decent at longer to mid range. Then, mobility wise, it also is a bit on the backdrop to the Stug 3G. I know 2 km per hour difference is not that much of a change, but still 40 kilometers and 49.02 degrees per second reverse speed will give you a little bit of an upper hand to the Stug 3G. So this is exactly where you need to focus in that case. You'll need to focus on concealment, because this tank is not going to be fast enough to run away. It doesn't have the gun, to brawl in kind of engagements, and 360 HP will not allow you to be a frontline vehicle. And it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be a tank that can hide very well, and you can see it does hide fairly nicely. This is obviously because the statistic to 596 points is only because I have a crew on it and some equipment. Otherwise, it would be higher. It would be same as the Stug 3G probably, and you can always get that higher. And this is exactly a kind of a taste what you would need to do in this tank. So statistically speaking, it shows us that this vehicle is not supposed to be an aggressive tank, and I think we all knew that. So how is it going to fare in combat? Because it only has 110 millimeters of penetration. In direct comparison to the 150mm of the Stug 3G, it shows you that that vehicle is more flexible than this tank. So it's basically, statistically speaking, a worse version of the Stug 3G. So, does this theory that we have proven practice? That's the next question, and we'll do that by jumping into 2 games, and we'll see where the limitations of this tank are and where the strong points of this vehicle are. Things a little bit differently. We're gonna be doing a live action commentary gameplay for this kind of review of the Stug 4. Why is that? That is because I am certainly very, very frustrated with this tank at this moment. Getting good gameplay in this tank is very, very difficult, and I know for a review that's almost a destructive kind of way of saying that this tank is not very good. And basically, to tell the truth, it is a tank that is just not as good as the standard version, the Stug IV. And that is something that I don't usually do. I don't usually just jump into a tank and say that it's a bad vehicle. Because I think certainly there is good for almost every vehicle that you can find. There is something positive about it. But the amount of times I've been, one-shotted by high explosive tanks just shows you that maybe that the matchup with tier 5 and tier 6 vehicles is a bit broken right now, because I have been one-shotted by KV2s 3 times in 3 matches and by 2 M4s with high explosive guns, and that's just something you can't really do anything against, even when you're trying to hide your vehicle. But let's give this tank another chance, and let's talk about what this tank can do very well. And what this tank can do fairly nicely, fairly well, is sniping. It is certainly a tank that has good accuracy, and it's going to be able to get some nice shots into the enemy tanks. The problem is just that, well, certainly the 110 millimeters of penetration are enough against tier 5 and tier 4 opponents if you're top tier. But even against tier 6 tanks, you're going to be struggling, and you'll have to resort to premium ammunition from time to time. Especially if there is a M4, A2, E3 or E2, or the Japanese heavy tank, the OI, that are trying to, engage you. And obviously, then you have to resort to premium ammunition. And I don't really see the benefit of this tank with this kind of amount of penetration of 110 millimeters when you can have the same kind of tank, the Stug 3G, excuse me, with 150 millimeters standard pen with the upgraded gun, and with, I think, something along the lines of 175 or 190 millimeters of pen with the premium ammunition type. So, yeah, basically this is nerfed Stug 3G. But is that a bad thing? No, it's not. First and foremost, it's a free tank that you'll pick up by just playing the game. So, you have that one going for you. You have a crew trainer for your German tank destroyers, and that is just something of value that you cannot overlook, because although it doesn't make premium currency, I think it should make premium currency. I think Wargaming shouldn't have cheaped out there, because this tank certainly doesn't really have a lot going for it. I will say that this tank is still a novelty, and a novelty is not something to be frowned upon. I think a novelty is something we should embrace. This tank is something we should embrace. I mean, so that is why I think it's totally okay to say that this tank is not the best vehicle at this tier, or even, at any kind of matchup where you have to have more than 110 millimeter standard amount of penetration. Now, 857, I have to be honest, this was my best game in this tank today, and I even tried to be the camping, tank destroyer that doesn't really move that far, and it hasn't really worked out for me, because I wasn't able to shoot the weak spots, I wasn't able to get the tanks engaged, and with the mobility that you have on this tank, you certainly are in a decent enough place to be able to move around, but you are not going to be the fastest. So once you'll have to switch your position, especially if you're under pressure from enemy vehicles, you're going to have a bad time. With the 360 HP that you have, you're going to have a very, very bad time. And if somebody loads high explosive, and it's a M4 or a KV2, you're going to have a very, very, very bad time. So basically what I'm saying is, this tank is fine to be played once or twice. Once you get it, you should not expect a Stug 3 replacement. This is certainly not a Stug 3G in a premium variant. This is basically speaking a nerfed Stug 3G that doesn't have the kind of the pen that you would have liked to have at this tier. So, do I feel kind of underwhelmed by owning this tank in my garage? No, I certainly don't think that is the fact. I think that this tank is very much a very nice feature in my garage. It's a tank that I value very much because it has this, I don't even know if that is a good argument or not, but for me this is a psychological first reward tank that I've unlocked and received by Wargaming for playing this game and for completing certain missions. And now, this is so weird. Whenever I'm trying to make a point that this tank is not that great, and I make a live commentary gameplay of the game, of this vehicle, I kind of get a decent result. And this decent result is not something that you'll be getting, and I'm not even sure if I can show you. As you can see right here, like 1, 2, at least 6 or 7 defeats in a row until I got a good game in this tank. So in this matchup against tier 4, tier 5 opponents, when you're top tier and there's not a lot of artillery, if there's no M4 with a derp gun, you'll be able to do quite a lot of damage with this tank, and certainly it's not bad. It's just not as good as the Stug 3G. And, well, that's just not as good as I would like to have it. If you have the opportunity and you want to get like a better version of the Stug 4, get the Stug 3G, it's better than this, but still it's a novelty tank, so you don't lose anything by owning it. It's just not as impressive as a lot of people would have thought at the beginning of, you know, the reward. So yeah, basically it is not that crazy, so it's kind of a letdown a little bit for some people, but I think so it's definitely worth getting. So we're gonna make a screenshot. This is going to be our thumbnail, and the next vehicle I'll be featuring is obviously the T28 HTC. I have made a review about that tank, but the new review will be more accurate and will be for 2018 now. It's going to be the updated version, and then we'll move on to the T55a, and then eventually we'll move on to the Object 260. So I hope you guys did enjoy this review. If you did, as always, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one.